We
Hello,
can
Iman.
hear you, Adam.
Hey, Iman, can you hear us? Okay. I guess I have to use my little speaker but can you hear us, Iman?
I can hear you very well.
Okay, good. I didn't know if the headphone jack would mess up the microphone, but it doesn't appear to. Okay, I guess I can't do it with my headphones, but that's okay. How is everyone today? I was actually talking with Reggie a few days ago in Mexico, and Reggie has started teaching again. Classes have started in Mexico. I'm not sure if he can join us. He's really busy with preparations. I guess in Mexico, there's no such thing, or they're starting to introduce teachers college, but otherwise they just throw people into the deep end. And his background, education, is in science, and there he is having to teach high school students science without any kind of preparation or guidance or whatever, and it's a bit overwhelming. But I told Reggie, I don't know if I have it on my phone now, but there is an app on the phone. Let me see if I have it. I might not. Oh, yeah. Whoops. See it? It's called the Mindfulness Bell.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And, you know, it's an app that's available in Android, and it's available. You can hear it. I've got it.
Yeah. Great.
I'm not sure what my settings are. It's a wonderful thing to have. I think I must have it set low. But you can set the app. It's called Mindfulness Bell. It's a free app. You can set it to ring loud. I have it obviously ringing softly. So it's a wonderful thing to have, so that when you walk around, it's like ding, and it, you know, like you can set it to vary the time length. I'm also going to show you, if I can find it. I probably won't be able to. I've got something on my computer as well. I haven't used it in such a long time that I don't remember where I put it.
Where is it about you?
Let me just give me a second. Let's see if I can find it. I can't. Somewhere on my, I have no idea where I've put it. I've got so many tags on my computer. It's actually a website. You just click onto it. It's there on your computer. And you can set the bell to ring whenever you want. Yeah, I've got so many tabs. Yeah, I'll never be able to find it. I should have prepared ahead of time. I mean, the mindfulness app for a smartphone is a wonderful tool. It's like walking around with your own little mindfulness bell that brings you back to the moment. When I was in briefly, the 11 months I spent in a Gurdjieff Bennett group, whenever we had group parties or sort of, bigger gatherings than the group meetings, someone was always elected or volunteered or coerced into carrying around a bell, which they had to ring at specific times during the party in order to bring everyone back to themselves. And so it was actually an exercise in focused attention for the person who had to walk around with the bell. Usually it was me that was nominated to do that. And so, I had to ring the bell every half hour, exactly on the half hour, to bring us all back into ourself and into the moment. So let's just do that. Let's become aware of our body. Let's just become aware of our breathing. And there are numerous ways of expressing this. Uspensky, in the fourth way, talked about the 3 lines of work. He said the first line of work is for oneself, the second is for one's group, and the third is for the work itself. Mr. Gurdjieff, in Search of the Miraculous, as quoted by P.D. Uspensky, changed it slightly, or I think Uspensky changed it slightly. Mr. Gurdjieff talked about the work for ourself, the work for our group, and then the work for the person running the group, the leader of the group. But to realize that we're working along 3 lines. Myself, my preference is to think about, I do this work for myself. I do this work for humanity, and I do this work for the earth herself. So it's the principle of the 3 lines of work. And this is also connected to the fact that, we have 3 being foods. We have, the octave of food, the octave of air, and the octave of impressions, which are what we receive in through our eyes, ears, nose, taste buds. And 1 line is not sufficient because it'll go from do, re, mi, and it will stop. And you will need another line to start at do to continue it onwards. And then that will stop, and you will need a 3rd line of work to continue it onwards. And I'll just pull up a diagram I've shown many times that just basically illustrates this in terms of, the food that we eat. So if you notice over on the very right-hand side, the octave of food starts at do 768. It moves up to mi 192, and then it comes to a stop unless there is an outside force of the sufficient quality and quantity to help it move up. And then you have those 2 lines moving up until the 3rd line comes in at the sufficient quality and quantity. If we go over and look at the normal man in the state of waking sleep, the impressions that we receive over there does not have the normal quality and quantity. It's the right quality, it's the right frequency, but it just doesn't have the right effect, the right, best word I can think of is quantity to help us. So whenever we work for ourselves, whenever we do any inner kind of work, it's important to just acknowledge to ourselves that we are working along 3 lines. That there is 1 line, the work for ourselves, and the way I prefer it. The next line, the work for humanity, for our fellow human being. And then the 3rd line, the work for the earth herself. So just in your mind, silently repeat after me. I work for myself. I work for humanity. And I work for the earth herself. And, things like this, if you dig a little bit deeper into the Gurdjieff teachings, you realize that Mr. Gurdjieff used these conscious affirmations a lot, conscious focusing of our intent, saying phrases. Another one that he said that was very good, and I'm not going to get it exactly, was, may the results of this exercise be well, this is my version. May the results of this exercise be transubstantiated in me for my being. I usually do that at the end, but we can do it at the beginning as well. I want to keep these substances that I grow and that I create in these inner exercises for myself, to grow my being, because when I grow my being, I have a very subtle, non-physical effect on the people around me. And I also have a very subtle, non-physical effect on the world itself. And I shouldn't say non-physical, but really, really refined physicality. So bring yourself back to your body. Bring yourself back to your breathing. And realize that there is a force in the head. And it's the force of our conscious attention. A chimpanzee, if you tap it on the right shoulder, will draw its attention to its right shoulder. But it doesn't have that executive part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex that we have, that allows us to direct our attention consciously to our right shoulder. The sensation of our right shoulder was always there. It was always present. But through harnessing the power of our head brain, harnessing the power of our head brain to focus our attention, we can bring our attention to our right shoulder. And I'm going to riff and just give my version of a self-sensing exercise that I learned from a recording by Adie. And Adie was English, but he moved to Australia. He had a lung taken out, and it turned out nothing wrong with the lung. So he only had one lung, and he wanted to go to a warm, dry climate. And he went to Australia, and he set up a group there. And a gentleman by the name of Joseph Aziz wrote the biography. Adie, I think it's called, subtitled, a Gurdjieff student or pupil in Australia. And there are some recordings that Adie made. And so this self-sensing exercise, and I find it different than the J.G. Bennett 60-point exercise, which we've done, which is going down 30 points on one side of the body and up 30 points in the other side. And Adie also in this recording emphasized the power of the head brain. He didn't quite express it the way I did. The force of conscious attention that we can wield with the head brain, but we can bring that force of conscious attention to our right shoulder. And we can even allow the sensation of our right shoulder to grow. And then we can bring this force of conscious attention into our right upper arm, our right bicep. And we can bring it down into our right elbow and the crook, the bend in our right elbow, down to our lower arm, down to our right wrist. And then we can direct this force of conscious attention, bringing this force from the mind down to the sensation of the palm of our right hand. And then we can direct it into our right thumb. We can become aware of the skin in our right thumb, the pad at the top of our right thumb, the tip of our right thumb, the nail in our right thumb. And then we can direct it into our right index finger, our right middle finger, our right fourth finger, our right baby finger, the top of our right hand, and then moving back up our right wrist, our right forearm, lower arm, our right elbow, our right upper arm, and right up back again to our right shoulder. And then draw your attention to your entire right arm. Sense your whole right arm at once, becoming aware of these separate points while also remaining aware of the whole of your right arm. And then, while keeping a part of your attention on your right arm, allow another part of your attention to go to your right hip. So aware of your right arm and your right hip. And holding that attention on your right arm, we're going to move down the right leg. So become aware of your right upper leg, your right thigh, your right knee and the bend behind your right knee, your right shin and calf, your right heel, the bottom of your right foot, the instep of your right foot, right up to the tips of your toes. And again, I've heard this expressed elsewhere, it's very important to learn to distinguish between each one of our toes. And I find that for me, the hardest was to distinguish between the third and fourth toe. But it's something that we need to work on if we can't do it. Just work on sensing the toes, perhaps doing the 60 bone exercise. So become aware of your right big toe, your right second toe, your right middle toe, your right fourth toe, your right baby toe, the top of your right foot, your right ankle, right lower leg, right knee, upper leg and hip, and then develop the sensation of your whole right leg while also remaining aware of the sensation of your right arm, aware of both your right arm and your right leg, aware of them as separate and distinct parts, and aware of them together as well. And then while holding the awareness of your right arm and your right leg, divide your attention further and become aware of the sensation of your left hip, your left thigh, upper leg, your left knee and the crook or bend behind your left knee, your left shin and calf, your left ankle, and then down to your left heel, the bottom of your left foot, including the instep, right to the tip of your toes. And then become aware of your left baby toe, your left fourth toe, your left middle toe, your left second toe, your left big toe, the top of your left foot, and then moving up your left leg again, your ankle, your shin and calf, your left knee, your left thigh, back up to your left hip, and then develop the sensation of your whole left leg while also remaining aware of the sensation of your right leg and right arm. And while holding the awareness of these three limbs, use the force of your conscious attention, the force of your head brain, to bring your attention to your left shoulder, your left upper arm, your left elbow and the bend behind your elbow, your left lower arm, your left wrist, your left palm, and then become aware of your left baby finger, your left fourth finger, your left middle finger, your left index finger, your left thumb, the top of your left hand, and then moving back up your left wrist, forearm, elbow, upper arm to your left shoulder. And then develop the sensation of your whole left arm while also being aware of your left leg and right arm. developing the sensation of all 4 of your limbs. And it's important within these teachings to develop this awareness of our limbs. Mr. Gurdjieff said that we receive forces through our limbs. And there's an exercise, I'm not going to go into it today, but it's called the 4 ideals exercise that involves our limbs. So this is a very important awareness, to be aware of your right arm, right leg, and left arm, to be aware of all 4 of your limbs. And while holding this awareness of all 4 of your limbs, bring your awareness to your spine and make whatever adjustments you need in order to make sure that your head is nicely and comfortably balanced on your neck, which is balanced on your shoulders, which is balanced on your spine, which is balanced on your hip, making sure that your upper body is in a position where the energy is able to flow freely. And while becoming aware or remaining aware of your 4 limbs, direct your attention to your lower spine. And we are going to move up the spinal column. George Adie said it's important to try your best to become aware of each vertebrae in your spine. So there are 5 vertebrae, 5 thoracic vertebrae in the lower part of your spine. So use your mind or imagine as best you can, sensing, I think it's lumbar 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then actually the lumbar part, that's the lower back. And then the thoracic vertebrae, there are 12 of them, moving from the middle back up through the shoulder blades, up to your shoulders. So try to become aware, moving up through the thoracic vertebrae, from the first to the second, to the third, to the fourth, to the fifth, slowly working your way up your back to the 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th. And then there are 7 vertebrae in the neck. So continue up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And become aware of your entire spine. Become aware of the vertebrae in your spine, while also remaining aware of your 4 limbs. And then move up into the occipital bone right in the back of your skull. And then move up into the temporal bones in the side and the parietal bone in the top of your skull. And then move your sensation into the frontal bone in your skull. So aware of all 4 limbs, your spine, and your skull. And then move down into your eye sockets. Become aware of your eye sockets. Draw your attention to the fact that your eyes are like 2 spheres, 2 orbs resting in your eye sockets. And then move your attention down into your nasal passages just below your eye sockets, and then down into the roof of your mouth, and then down to where your teeth meet your lips, then down to your tongue. Notice how your tongue is resting in the base of your mouth. Become aware of how the tip of your tongue is pressing against the lower front teeth. And then move your awareness down into the skin and the fleshy part in your jaw just below. And then move into the back of your throat. And then become aware of your whole head. Aware of all 4 limbs. Aware of your spine, aware of all of the bones in your skull, your eye sockets, nasal passages, the roof of your mouth, your teeth touching your lips, your tongue in the bottom of your mouth, the tip touching your teeth, and your jaw and the flesh underneath, and your throat. Aware of all of these together, and then move down your throat. And become aware of your chest. Allow the sensation to spread out your chest. And then allow it to seep down into your abdomen, your lower abdomen, and right down to your sexual organs. And try to become aware of all of this at once. Your forelimbs, your spine, your skull, your eye sockets, your nasal passage, the roof of your mouth, the teeth touching your lips, your tongue, your throat, your chest, your solar plexus, your abdomen, right down to your sexual organs. So this is a very interesting, different approach to self-sensing than the one taught by J.G. Bennett, which starts on the right side and moves down 30 points in the right side of the body and back up 30 points in the other side, to be called his oops. Oh, no, she's calling me on the top. We just lost Iman. I'm trying to stop this. Sorry about that. I've got a caller on this. And so I guess if we lose her, I'm just trying to call her.
Allan, what's limbs? Limbs, what's the word limbs ubicated? Limb. The word limb is...
Lymph?
What is the significance of limb?
The lymph is one of the lymph nodes are one of the cleaning systems for the body, getting rid of debris and junk. But I don't want to go into that right now.
I know.
Iman? Okay.
Suddenly I couldn't hear you for a little bit, but now I can hear you.
Okay, good. That's good. I should mention, for those who will be watching later, Aman is coming from Damascus, Syria. And the Crimea, Syria, Cuba, and Russia, you can't do Zoom. And I use Zoom because I can record these meetings with a really good fidelity, which you can't do with Skype and other things. So that's why she's not able to join us with Zoom. She's in the middle of a country. Well, she's not in the middle of a country. She's in the capital city of a country still under civil war. And I have a feeling that the fact that we can't do the Zoom with her, Crimea, Cuba, other places that are under the Russian influence, there's got to be some kind of connection, but I can still Skype with her. At any rate, let's bring ourselves back to our body, back to our forelimbs, back to our spine, back to our skull, moving down, our nasal passage, roof of mouth, teeth touching lips, tongue touching the bottom of the bottom teeth and resting in our mouth, underneath our tongue, our throat, our chest, our solar plexus, down to our sexual organs. Become aware of the sensation of self. And I like how it comes up the back and then curves around and goes down the front. It starts with the forelimbs, and it's a different way. So this flow that comes up the back and then down the front of my torso and my head and torso, as well as my forelimbs. So try to hold on to this sensation of self. Try to hold on to this awareness that we have a body. Now, Mr. Gurdjieff made it very clear to Catherine Hulme in her small little volume. It's not published. I believe it's in one of the university libraries of her notes, called Conversations with Gurdjieff, where he has Catherine Hulme and the Ladies of the Rope, the group that he formed in 1934 in Paris. He has them repeat, I am and I have a body. I am and I have a body. And he was really insistent on her realizing that we are not our body. We possess a body. We are embodied beings, but we should not become identified with our body. The state of identification where we really believe we are our body. He also told her as well that we don't have essence. We have human essence. It's like human essence is, and this is my metaphor, is like an ocean. And our essence is a cup taken out of that ocean, and it will return to that ocean. And so, you know, if you read Ouspensky, you will think essence is so important, but we're not supposed to be identified with our essence as well. So I am, and I have a body. So just think these words: I am, I have a body. And as you say, I have a body, do your best to sense all four limbs, your spine up your skull, down, down the front. Try to sense your body. I am, I have a body. And be aware of your physical embodiment. Be aware of your body. And I'm not going to go into it today, but this is actually part of a much broader exercise that Joseph Aziz gave his students. And I'm going to do something very similar. I'm rewriting it now. I'm refining it using my understanding of these teachings, using my understanding of inner exercises, just kind of clean it up a little bit so it makes more sense, and it's done in a slightly more regimented fashion, and I will be putting it up online, very similar to what I did this week on YouTube. And let me just go to what I did on YouTube. Let me see if I can find it fairly quickly. Just a second. And that caused such a, I'm getting like, I don't know, half a dozen or more people, you know, just message after message wanting to know more. So I thought I would discuss it in this. So I'm just going to bring it up on the screen. Whoops. I don't want to. So this is a recording that I put up online this week. Let me just. Or why don't I?
Very good.
So I'm just going to stop. So on this recording, I call it, you know, Allan's Gurdjieffian compilation exercise. And Mr. Gurdjieff said it's very important to begin inner work with relaxation. And so I work on relaxing the body. I work on relaxing the body and relaxing the body. And it also serves and doubles as a sensation exercise. Because as we relax our forehead or relax our nose or our cheeks or whatever, we have to sense those parts of our body. And then I go into the digesting air exercise. And this exercise that I use on this recording is going to be different than the one that I'm going to present that George Adie talked about. George Adie goes into one that's more complex. But the digesting exercise I talk about on this recording is the one that Mr. Gurdjieff presents in Gurdjieff's early talks, 1914 to 1931, even though the exercise is right in the back of that book and it's given in 1939. But it's about the air we breathe. And then I also came across another rendition in The Reality of Being by Jean de Salzman, who became the principal leader of the work after Mr. Gurdjieff died. And so I've combined those two into a single one, which I've talked about before in these meetings. And then the 60 bone exercise, which we've done before in these meetings. The 60 bone exercise, the 12 joint exercise, and the 10 bone illumination exercise all come from a website, www.endlesssearch.co.uk. And this is a website that's run by, I think his name is Ian McFarlane. I forget the first name, but I think it's Ian McFarlane. And someone who has been coming to my real groups, my Tuesday evening groups, spent 15 years studying with Paul Beidler. And they would, every 6 weeks, they would get into a van in Toronto, drive down to Northern Forest in Pennsylvania, where Beidler was, and work with him for the weekend, and then come back and go down every 6 weeks. And she was the one who pointed me to these exercises. So the 60 bone exercise, there are 15 bones in each limb. And so, you know, with, not each limb, each hand and finger, hand and foot. So, you know, 3 bones in our hands. So this is 15 bones. 30 bones in our feet is another 30 bones. So that's the 60 bone exercise. It's a good exercise to learn, to bring your awareness and be able to differentiate your middle toe from your 4th toe from your baby toe. And then I have Mr. Gurdjieff's filling exercise. And people have asked me where I've got all these from, so I'm explaining it now. I learned the filling exercise when I was in the Gurdjieff Bennett group for 11 months. And they emphasized that this came directly from Mr. Gurdjieff. And it does, and I found this exercise in Mr. Gurdjieff's, you know, the things that people said about him and recorded. And so, but I'm using the version that I was sort of taught in the group. So that's where that came from. And then the collected state exercise comes from a specific meeting in a volume that's online called Transcripts of Paris Meetings, 1938 to 1946. And I believe it's meeting 28, except in the version that's available online, it has been censored and cut out. And it's in parentheses. Mr. Gurdjieff gives an exercise. I have a friend in Germany who has access to material, and I asked him if he knew what the exercise was, and he actually had a copy of this manuscript or of this book. I don't think it's been published necessarily in book form, but it's online, where it was uncensored. Well, actually, no, he had a published version. So he had a hard copy, and he scanned that exercise, the collected state exercise, and sent it to me so that I had a copy of it in Mr. Gurdjieff's actual words. So this is where it all comes from. So those who were interested, and I've tried to point it out to them. Another thing is, you know, there are 3 prayers. And these prayers are all found on the same page in Beelzebub Tales to his grandson. And from my memory, it's around page 760, 768. They are all on the same page. He doesn't quite say that positive, negative, and equal, you know, the active, passive, and reconciling, but I've put the numerical notations in it. And the 12 joint exercise, so we've got, you know, our wrist, elbow, shoulder joint, our hip, knee, ankle joint. So 3 joints in each limb, 12 joints. The sources of divine rejoicings, revolts, and sufferings, direct your actions on us, is composed of exactly 12 words. So there's the proper sequence of saying these words while we're working on ourselves. This is a moving exercise primarily, though you can do it sitting down. So if you're working in the garden, going for a walk, doing some kind of movement, this is a good exercise. And it was something that Beidler had his students do when they came to Northern Forest and spent the weekend there. If they had to go into the forest to collect wood or build the fire or work in the kitchen or whatever, moving around to do that exercise. Now there are 12 words in that exercise. There are 12 joints that we can work on. I mean, we actually have more joints. Every spine is a joint. We've got joints in our toes, but these are the 12 major joints in our body. The holy affirming exercise also has 12 words. So we don't necessarily have to do the sources of divine all the time. We can start with our right wrist and go holy, our right elbow affirming, our right shoulder holy, our left hip denying, our left knee holy, our left ankle reconciling, our right ankle transubstantiate, our right knee in, our right hip me, and then our right shoulder for, our right elbow, or our left shoulder for, our left elbow my, and our left wrist being. So we can use both of those prayers for the 12 joint exercise. We can also, there's another exercise that he taught, which, let me just go back to the original, the 12 joint exercise, the 60 bone illumination exercise. So our 3 bones, say on our thumb, going right into the center of our hand, the 3 bones in our right index finger. So wholly denying the whole of the thumb, those 3 bones, wholly reconciling the index finger, or wholly denying the index finger, wholly reconciling the middle finger, the 4th finger transubstantiate in me, and the 5th, or the baby finger, for my being. And then this is reversed when we do the left side of the body. So the wholly affirming is the baby finger, wholly denying the 4th, wholly reconciling the middle, transubstantiate in me the index, and for my being, the thumb. However, we can also use holy God. So holy God, the thumb, holy firm, the index finger, holy immortal, the middle finger, have mercy, the 4th finger, and on us, the baby finger. So in my recording, I only use one of these prayers for each, but we can shift it around. And then there's the 10 bone illumination exercise. And in my recording, I use the holy God for that one. For the 60 bone, hands and fingers exercise, I use the holy affirming. But, with the 10 bone illumination exercise, we sense the bones in our limbs and imagine the marrow inside illuminated. And we start with the lower leg. So holy, the upper leg, God, the pelvis holy, the upper left leg firm, the lower left leg holy, the spine and skull immortal, and then the right upper arm bone and the illumination in the marrow have, the lower arm mercy, the upper arm on us. We can also use the holy affirming prayer for that one as well. So this is, a way of, describing this exercise. I'm going to put a link for it when I post this video. But, if you don't see the link or you're finding this some other way, you just type in Allan's Gurdjieffian compilation exercise number 1, and you will find it on YouTube. And this was actually an exercise. I'm going to just get out of this. This was an exercise that I shared about 6 weeks ago, but it was just an audio exercise that people had to go to MediaFire and then download or listen to it there. And I guess, when you put visuals and put the words on, it took me about 15 hours to get it properly done for YouTube with all the words and everything. I've gotten a better response for this video than any video that I've ever done about these teachings. But I did post it widely. I've had more people contact me privately asking me where I got all this information from. They wanted to make sure it was authentic, I guess, or whatever. But you guys have worked through this, I hope. I know Ian has. You've done the audio recording. You've been listening to it for weeks. Want to share some of your experiences?
Yeah, I guess. I worked through it with the audio recording for about a week. Week or maybe it was 2 weeks, but then after that I stopped doing the recording and started trying to do it for myself.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's an important thing for those listening. These recordings are just training wheels, just so you know what to do, and you don't have to do them all. you can just focus on a specific one, but I wanted to put them all together so you can learn all of these exercises at once. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no. Wait. So it would take me about half an hour. And I would, usually by the time I was done, there'd be sort of this lightness in and around my body. Not necessarily bright, but just sort of like I'd feel less encumbered. My breath would come through more easily. I mean, it's hard to say. Every time I do it, it's a little bit different. But it really runs through the whole body, especially with the focus on the bones in the 3 different bone exercises. Seems to give it kind of a weight or an anchoring to the body that is important, kind of in the middle. I'm not sure what else to say. I mean, it's a great compilation. It's definitely seems to hit a lot of the different points of bodily mindfulness, breathing mindfulness, the prayers, bringing in the thoughts or the intellectual center. Yeah.
One thing I'll mention, Mr. Gurdjieff said that, we have a head brain, a body brain, and a feeling brain, an intellectual center, a physical center, and an emotional center. And normally we're fractured beings, and our 3 brains do not operate together. And although we now live in a digital world, there used to be a time when all watches, you had to wind them up. There was a spring in the watch that you wound up, and as the spring unwound, the watch kept time, or I'm not doing it the right way, at least myself, I'm going counterclockwise rather than clockwise. And when the spring was fully unwound, that center, that brain died. And he said, one of the horrific things is that it is possible to die by thirds. My mother died by a third. Her head brain went. She started suffering from dementia. My mother was very athletic, playing badminton, tennis. She didn't smoke. She didn't drink a lot. She drank occasionally. Very much a social drinker. Maybe every month or 2 months she would drink. Really into, her body, taking care of it. But her head brain wound down. She was always reading and listening to news. And Catherine Hulme, in the thing that I mentioned earlier, Conversations with Gurdjieff, talked about death by newspapers. So, overly active in the head brain. And when we are separate, when we are broken, when these centers are operating independently from each other, the springs wind down. And once they're wound down, that's it. Now, Mr. Gurdjieff told Catherine Hulme that we can introduce a regulator. And the regulator has a profound effect on this process. And he defined a regulator as in being 2 or 3 centers operating together. So the prayers done in conjunction with the bones, the prayers done in conjunction with sensing, so the head brain, the formatory apparatus, the thinking apparatus, the part that generates the words in our brain, in conjunction with our body, is one such regulator. So by engaging in these 2 and 3-brained activities, we are introducing this regulator into our system, which then has an effect of balancing our system and preventing, us from growing old too quickly. He also talks about this in Tales. But I thought it was very clear what he told Catherine Hulme, because he described the antidote to these springs running down, without all of the fancy words and neologisms that he has in Tales. So a lot of these exercises, the ones particularly that include these prayers, are two-brained exercises. And if we can add the third brain, if we can add the feeling brain, and when I get when I do my version and I've got it all cleaned up of the George Adie preparation number 6 recording, it is a three-brained exercise where we try to become aware of all three of our brains. Briefly in the recording, the digesting air, becoming aware of breathing in air, and as we breathe out a gray, foggy waste, representing to ourselves that something remains, and trying to breathe in a tiny dollop of joy in that exercise is a three-brained exercise. And so by doing these exercises, we begin to force these three parts of ourselves into harmony and into alignment. So it's very important to do them, to do bone exercises and things like that with the prayers. Paul Beidler recommended to his students, and Paul Beidler, he came to the Prieuré in 1923 when he was an architectural student in Paris, even though he was an American. And my youngest daughter, I guess she doesn't know I'm doing this, 1923, and he had an interesting background. When he was a teenager, when he was 17, he was in the Middle East, and the Yazidis that Mr. Gurdjieff talked about, drawing a circle around them, and special people in the Middle East. He was taken in by their wise men, and he spent like a couple of years with them. And he spoke Turkish, and so after Mr. Gurdjieff died, both he and Bennett did some traveling together in the Middle East because they both spoke the language. And Beidler, he set himself a plan that every 10 years he changed professions. Two of them, one was he spent 10 years as an architect. He also spent 10 years as a ship's captain. I mean, the idea of being a ship's captain, I don't know, there's something romantic about that. But he recommended doing the 60 bone exercise in the morning. And we don't just do it once. I only go through it once in the recording, because to go through it 3 times is, would have added to the recording. The other exercises, the 10 bone and the 12 joint exercises, I do go through 3 times because, Mr. Gurdjieff said it's always good to do things 3 times. So just to become aware in the morning that we move through it. And, we've talked about this, Ian. You've noticed something about that you get to a certain point and then you lose it and you've begun to, can you discuss that?
Yeah. What I've noticed with that one is I'll start 2, 3, 4, 5, and I'll move to my feet, and usually by about halfway through my first foot, what I've noticed is I'll have part of my mind or whatever, I'll be doing the prayers, and then something will it feels like something kind of sneaks in over the top, almost like a cloud. And if I'm paying attention, I can kind of like brush it aside or stay focused on the toes. Oftentimes, especially because when it's so early in the morning, I don't notice that, and then all of a sudden I'm halfway through a story about whatever it was that kind of obscured over it, whether it's what I'm doing that day or a dream I had, or I'm in some kind of other dream kind of comes in, and so I start over again with the right thumb, and I do it. I keep doing it until, when I can, I keep doing it until I've run through the correct number with the feet, the correct order 3 times. And anytime I fall off of that, I'll just start back over. But it's really interesting to see how easily my intention to do it, something that seems so easy, and something that I can pull off much more easily when I'm active in my day, and I'm sitting and I'm focused on just this exercise, how hard it is to do when, I'm just waking up, when my attention's still a little relaxed. It's really been interesting.
I want to say as well, this is very important to try to do inner work, to try to sense your body, to try to sense your bones, to try to do exercises like this the moment you're aware that you are awake in the morning, before you even get out of bed. I hope to be presenting another exercise that Paul Beidler taught his students, and I'm sure this one comes from Mr. Gurdjieff, where you lie in bed before you get up and you imagine getting out of bed, you imagine walking to your door, reaching, doing whatever you do for the first couple of minutes in the morning, and then you go do that. And I will be talking about the importance of that. But I don't want to go into that right now. There's a special sacredness to the state that we wake up into. And it's not quite discombobulated. We're not quite broken up. So it's a great time to do work. And some people claim that this was something that was added by Madame de Salzmann after Mr. Gurdjieff died, except Madame Uspensky had students do it, for the period when she was with her husband, P.D. Uspensky, and she always and only considered Mr. Gurdjieff to be her teacher. And when Uspensky told all of his students, choose Mr. Gurdjieff or me, but if you go and see Mr. Gurdjieff, you cannot work with me, Madame Uspensky actually went to Mr. Gurdjieff and he told her to go back, sort of be the spy in the camp. So I think this exercise actually goes back farther, and I think that there is a connection to Mr. Gurdjieff, and it's called just sitting. It's the sitting exercise. So in the morning, we wake up, then we've got to go, do whatever we have to do, maybe have our cup of coffee and go to the toilet and maybe have a little bit to eat or whatever. But still in that moment, when we're still more collected, to sit and to do various exercises as we're sitting, before we begin our day and get involved in the hustle and bustle. And the interesting thing is, if you practice these exercises in mindful awareness, these exercises in the focusing of the conscious attention of the head brain on the sensation of the body or the breathing, on these exercises, that somehow this will help your ability to work throughout the day. So time invested in the morning before life has ripped you apart and you've got to run for the bus, you get to work or get in the car and get stuck in traffic. The time we invest in the morning, closest to our sleep, pays dividends throughout the day. So it's important and good to try to do this in the morning. Guido, do you have, have you tried the exercise? Do you have any comments on it?
Yes. It's very hard to describe the result. The result is something you can see, but although you may be able to feel during the day, especially when you do it in the morning, as you say, like before getting up out of the bed, I do it. I've been doing it for sometimes, and then the next level of understanding what happened, because I do that, is very intellectual. And it's very hard, as I said, to describe what happened to me or what really happened during the day. But that kind of maybe I can call it meditation. which is the one I've been practicing hard of the whole of the exercises to put up on the video, you know. The 61 exercise, I like it very much, and I've been doing it, I don't say a lot, but quite a few times. But like I said, like I said, no, I'm going to say only that. What I have to say is, when when we stop having this meeting now in this application of Zoom, I turn off and I go to and I start my life or my daily life doing it, like I live alone. You know, I had to do I had to make my food myself. You know, simple food. You know, like full of proteins. And I forget, and I started forgetting everything about the work. Maybe uh, the mindful bed is a very good reminder, because you know the the is good. You know, it may be like in the middle or in the car. I put some dots so I can remember. See, I had a friend that is not familiar with these teachings, you know. And he told about he is speaking nonsense all the time. And I say it's a very good friend of mine, but he don't know nothing about the work.
Mm.
And I tell him about the work, and he say he don't understand. He's just bullshit, you know.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I feel so blessed that I have these teachings. On Facebook, a person wrote, who's older than me, and I'm 60. He said he's 10 years older than me. He wrote, you know, that the Gurdjieff teachings are the teachings you come across after you've worked your way through all the other stuff. And, you know, if you're lucky, you find these. And then you realize that they're gold. And I was very lucky. I said I did it reverse. I found these teachings first. And then I worked my way through other teachings. I spent 3 years studying Hinduism at university. I've been part of Sufi, Zakir groups, and I've been, that's Iman. I think I keep on losing her. And when she calls back, it's not on my tablet. Let's see if we can get her back. So I did it reverse, where, whoops. I guess it's not going to work. I did it reverse. You know, I found these teachings, and then I moved to Ottawa, and there was no way I could work with a group there. And so I started studying Hinduism, and I explored Buddhism and Sufism and other things. But I always knew that these were my central teachings. And so I feel very blessed to have found them. I feel very blessed to have spent the last 37 years working through them and understanding them. You know, every year my understanding and my appreciation of them deepens, because these are truly teachings that we can use in life. We don't have to go off and meditate. And it's not all about meditation. You know, as a lot of other teachings are, they just say meditate or meditate more, do it more. This is finding where we're broken, finding out where we're losing and leaking energy, and things that I will be talking about in future meetings. Wonderful, wonderful. Any other comments? Any questions?
Excuse me, where are the limbs situated in your body? The limbs. What are the 4 limbs? Because limbs is one thing, but limbs, what limbs is? I don't know what limb is.
Oh, well, this is a limb, this is a limb, and our legs are limbs. L-I-M-B. So our arms and legs are our limbs. So
the extremities. The
No, the limb,
extremities?
a limb, an arm.
Extremities.
Our arm is a
Oh.
limb. You know, our leg is a limb. We've got 4 limbs, so 2 arms and 2 legs. They are our limbs.
Now I got it. Okay. Thank
Yeah.
you.
You know, that's the unfortunate, you know, I have people who ask me when I'm going to have these exercises in Spanish and other languages, and unfortunately, never, unless they want to do it and translate them. I actually have someone who volunteered to do that in Portuguese. We'll see. You know, I've given him the exercises, and maybe I'll get a Portuguese version of it done. But yeah, the limb, this is a limb, my arm. My leg is another limb, but I'm not going to lift my leg up and show it.
No. Yeah. Well, Alan, I'm very fortunate. I'm very fortunate to have this by video, and I wanna keep on studying a lot, you know, to practice. Yeah, I'm practicing as well. Thank you.
Okay. Throughout this recording or this meeting, how mindful have you been? Intermittent? Do we need something like a bell to bring us back to the awareness of our body?
Yeah,
To
we
be
need that.
aware of our sensing. I once gave a series of talks in the fall of 2007, where I linked the Old Testament to the Gurdjieff teachings, and at the end of each talk, I gave a mindfulness exercise, a way of becoming aware of perhaps what we could see or the sensation of our body or whatever. And one of those meetings, I brought to recording that I think it was like every 3 minutes, I said the word sensing. And so it played in the background. And so whenever the word sensing was said, they were supposed to sense their body. And they looked at me with such perplexity. It's like they didn't understand, what I was trying to get them to do. But, to bring yourself back to your body, the sensation of self. And Mr. Gurdjieff did talk about reminding factors. Reminding factors can be other people. They can be notes that we stick on in the mirror in our bathroom that we see when we look at our face. They can be strings tied around our hands. I've heard of someone who had rings on their fingers and they were always changing the rings on their fingers. One of the things I used to do years ago, I've got certain things in my pockets, and every few weeks I would change it all around. So where are my keys? And I would use that as reminding factors. The mindfulness bell is a wonderful reminding factor. And I just tried to locate it again online, and I think it's been changed, which is why I can't find it online. I always found that when I had it online and I was doing things online, and I had to listen to it every second day, because if I had it on all the time, some part of me habituated to the process and I wasn't that aware of it. So when I did it intermittently, so every second day or whatever, I became aware of it. But ultimately, we don't want to have reminding factors. We want to develop the ability to really be mindful. As Mr. Gurdjieff said, remember yourself always and everywhere. And John Kabat-Zinn, the Buddhist molecular biologist, professor of medicine, who introduced mindfulness to the West, likened it to a muscle. And I have a little problem with this analogy. I've got a better analogy. I don't want to go into that now. But it is, in a way, like a muscle. The more we exercise it, the stronger it becomes. And the easier it becomes for us to do this. So, for instance, 10 years ago, even less than 10 years ago, I could not talk and remain aware of the sensation of my body. talking and remaining aware of the sensation of myself were incompatible. The words and pictures of the head brain, the automatons of the head brain associated with language, and there's such an automatic level of language that as soon as I got into the language, I lost awareness of my body. But fortunately, being a hypnotherapist, working with clients, I realized how important it was for me to be in the mindful state. And when I'm in the mindful state, you know, I'm twice as intelligent, twice as vibrant, twice as aware of what's going on. So when I'm with my clients and I'm in the highest level that I can maintain, I see things and hear things and perceive things that I wouldn't in a lower state. And so I trained myself to bring my awareness back to my body, to bring it back to my body, to bring it back to my body. So when I'm walking down the street with my dog, I'm bringing it back to my body. When I'm sitting here talking, I'm aware of my body. But this is something that has taken me years to do. Though I wish I knew when I was a 23-year-old student, I would have loved to have had an hour to talk to myself now. And I would give myself all sorts of quick pointers like self-sensing and bring your awareness back and strengthen this. Because, you know, I didn't really know what I was doing back then, even though I was able to self-remember. And I was able to self-remember with emotion. So I was very lucky. I should have just always brought myself back to my body, brought myself back to my breathing, back to my body, back to my breathing, back to the sensation of self, and begin to develop the other parts. So this is something that it's very important to develop. And as we do, and as we explore this and we develop it, it gets easier and easier to do. And I've talked about this, and I will talk about it in later meetings. We're 3-story energy factories. I'll bring this up on the screen. We're 3-story energy factories. So the bottom here, normal man, you know, the center of gravity of their psychic life, using Mr. Gurdjieff's phrase, is in world 48. It's a very, very mechanical energy, and they have access to the mindful state at the highest level, and then really reactive, dark, lucid emotions like road rage, homicidal rage, absolute terror, fear. And we're energy factories, but we're leaking energy in world 96, and we're leaking energy in world 48. The bottom left square is normal man. And if we can figure out where we're broken, if we can figure out where we're leaking energy, and we leak energy in very specific ways. We leak it through the process of identification. This is where we lose awareness of ourselves and what we're doing. The classic example that I use is you're in a movie theater, during a suspenseful part, look around the theater and ask yourself, how many of them are actually in their bodies aware of themselves, or is their attention completely focused and absorbed with what is going on in the screen, on the screen? And that's a state of identification where you've lost awareness of yourself and you become what you're focused on. We also lose energy through egocentric emotions, in particular, egocentric negative emotions. Not all negative emotions are bad. Do not listen to Uspensky on that one. He didn't spend enough time with Mr. Gurdjieff. It's the emotions where underneath is the ego. There's a me, like anger. How could they do that to me? And, oh, I'm so frightened. I'm going to, me. We also lose it through excessive formatory thinking. So this is the words and pictures that whirl around in our mind. We also lose it through excessive body movements. You meet people and they just shake their leg all the time, and you know they're wasting the energy. One of the classic ones that was taught to people who join the foundation. Nowadays dishwashers are everywhere, but 50 years ago people would hand wash the dishes. Are you using your whole body to wash a dish, or are you using only the necessary muscles? So we waste it through excessive movement, through negative emotions, through identification, through daydreaming, And daydreaming is a wrong work of the intellectual center, working with the emotional center, and the ego is there as well. Daydreaming, imagination, and not all imagination is wrong. Unlike what Uspensky said, there's a higher form of imagination, which is actually active being mentation. But then as we're imagining, we're holding in the back of our awareness that sensation of self. And then there's the wrong work of centers. So the head brain, the intellectual center, trying to feel, or the feeling brain, trying to think. Even though there are exercises that Mr. Gurdjieff teaches where he tells you to try and think with the heart or feel with the mind, but this is more of a conscious attempt and endeavor rather than the subconscious way we do it. So there are various ways that a normal person leaks energy at the lower levels, world 96, world 48, that bottom square. And so part of the journey is looking in ourselves, figuring out where we're broken, where we're fractured, where we're leaking energy. And this is why Mr. Gurdjieff said that these teachings can never take the cookie cutter approach. In other words, what you tell one person is not what you tell another person. The exercises you give one person are not the exercises you give another person, because we leak energy in different ways. So, you know, we have different chief faults, different ways that we leak these energies. So one thing that we have to do is to figure out where we leak these energies. The other thing we have to do is, when we're the normal human being, we have to try to step up to world 24, the mindful realm, the realm of mindful awareness, as often as we can. And the analogy that I use here is like you've got a thread that's loose in your shirt. It's all wound. And that wound thread in your shirt is the leaking of the energy. But when you pull it from the top, the thread straightens. And so when we pull it from the top, when we are in the mindful state, when we are in world 24 and bringing that conscious attention to bear, we are not as fractured and as broken as we are at the lower level. And so through figuring out where we're leaking the energy, where we're broken, and through practicing, you know, this form of attention, which now is called mindfulness, it's the currency or the word that's in vogue today, we slowly shift our being upwards and move up to the next level. And so this is why I find these teachings very incredible, because rather than leaving the world, and I've talked about this in previous meetings, how the monastic tradition involves us leaving the world and going to a monastery and meditating, rather than leaving the world, because when you leave the world, a lot of that energy is no longer leaked out, because you shave your head, you wear robes, you do the same thing day after day, focusing on meditation. And so it's sort of like a hack, a cheat, a way of doing this process in a sort of an easier fashion. But when we do it in the world, these teachings are for in the world. We learn to work on ourselves. When someone upsets us, what is it within me? Where is that button within me that they are pushing? Most often it's the button of self-love, Monsieur Vanity, or Madame Vanity and Monsieur self-love. It's our ego. So when someone upsets you and they yell at you, don't say, why are you doing that? Don't yell back at them. You know, you thank them for the opportunity that they have given you to show you where these buttons are. Because at the lower levels, we're reactive beings. At the higher levels, we act rather than react. So this all fits in, doing these exercises, trying to bring ourselves back to our body, back to our breath, trying to bring ourselves back into the presence of myself here in this environment as often as we can, is like pulling the thread tight And the more we do that, the more we actually straighten out the lower levels. This is what they focus on partly in the monastic tradition. Your family upsets you, your neighbors upset you, living in the city upsets you, and everything like that. And you go and live in a monastery, and you just focus on meditation and mindfulness, and you pull yourself straight, and all the lower level eventually sort of comes into alignment, but it's artificial because it's outside of the world. But every time we become aware of our breath, every time we bring ourselves back to our body, every time we become aware of our four limbs, our right arm, right leg, left arm, become aware of our spine up to our skull, our nasal passages, the roof of our mouth, our lips, our teeth touching our lips, our tongue resting in our mouth, underneath, our throat, our chest, our solar plexus, our lower abdomen down to our sexual organs. Every time we develop this sensation of self, we're pulling our lower being into alignment. And in that moment that we are in that mindful state, in that moment that we are perhaps self-sensing or self-remembering, to become aware of what we can see, the light coming into our eyes, the sound coming into our ears, the smells coming into our nose, the taste in our mouth, while sensing our body and perhaps adding a degree of feeling. Every time we do that, we are pulling the thread straight, and in that moment, we're not quite as broken and fractured. It's like we pull ourselves into alignment. It's like the worker who's just like this, and then the boss walks by and they pretend they're alert and everything, and then they go back into the other state. So there are many different ways that we have to work through this, but this is sort of the theory and understanding of what we are really doing. We're growing our being. We want to move the house, the 3-story house where it's down in the valley. We want to move it halfway up the hill, and then we want to move it to the top of the hill. And just coming back to that, you'll notice the 3 squares there. Whoops, that's too much. You know, this is mechanical man, mindful man, and conscious man. And we keep on moving the center of gravity of our psychic life up. So mechanical man, normal man, at the highest, they can tap into the mindful state, but they can't maintain it. Mindful man, that's their central state, but they still can have a lot of mechanical things going on, but they're able to, at their highest level, tap into that conscious awareness. And then the conscious man at their lower level is the mindful state, and at their highest level is, you know, world 6, which is the lowest level of the Godhead. But, you know, Mr. Gurdjieff said that even a conscious man passes through all of these levels every day. So even the conscious man experiences the mechanical state and passes through them. So for someone to say that they exist purely in world 12, you know, people like Eckhart Tolle and a lot of other people who say they're conscious human beings and no, they don't experience those things. To me, my BS meter goes off, and I think, no, this is not according to law. You may be, when you're in front of a group of people, be in that conscious state, but, you know, going to sleep, you go down into the other states. Waking up, you come through the other states, and you can be pulled down into them throughout the day. And so a lot of people actually also talk about, you know, spiritual leaders, you know, they have access to the mindful state. The mindful state can be extremely emotionally reactive. And then they can say, oh, they yelled at me, so they're not really a teacher. But if you understand the theory behind this, no, that doesn't mean that. It just meant that they were down in the basement of their 3-story being yelling at you from the basement, and that they are, go back up. So, you know, understanding these teachings gives us a lot of this information. It's almost, we're almost out of time. Any questions, any comments, any things before we go?
Would you please think of think about another analogy of the thread.
Yeah.
There may be another analogy that be better understand this
Yeah.
for me.
Well,
Yes,
basically, when you're in the mindful state, when you're aware of your body, aware of your breathing, when you are present in this moment, you are not as broken and as fractured as when you are down in that mechanical level. So by being mindful, there's a greater unity to us. The three parts act in a greater unity. So this is a benefit of the mindful state. By doing this all the time, by bringing our awareness into our body, into our breath, perhaps self-remembering, we are actually working on the lower levels. We're working on healing the lower levels. In that moment, they are being healed. And so the more we do this, the more we bring ourselves back to our breath, back to the sensation of the body, the more the lower levels fall into alignment. But we should also be working on deliberately bringing those levels into alignment as well, because then we release the energy that allows us to be mindful. And I should also mention the mindful state is actually, it should have been, in, you know, for probably 200,000 years of our species was the natural state of man. St. Paul talked about carnal man, natural man, and spiritual man. He was, you know, carnal man was man in world 48, natural man in world 24, spiritual man in world 12. And I've talked about this before in other meetings. It should be our natural state, but we live in such abnormal conditions and in the world in such an abnormal way that we really are more head brain than anything, and we're not really aware of our body and our feelings and our breath and whatever. But that should be our natural state. But we're leaking so much energy, it's not fueling that mindful awareness. It's all being wasted. So these teachings are really to teach us how to free that energy and how to use these states to help us free ourselves from the energy. So by being mindful, we're working on the problem from the up down, and by becoming aware of, you know, identification and our negative emotions and those buttons, we're working from down up. And it's this two-pronged approach that really makes these teachings, in my opinion, amongst the best in the world. But I'm very prejudiced, and I'm very biased in favor of these teachings. Any other comments quickly? Okay, thank you for coming. And
Thank you very much.
people are watching this, just to let you know, I'm getting a fair bit of feedback on it. And enjoy the rest of your day. I have a mindfulness walk I'm going to be leading in about an hour and a half. I've waited. It's been so hot here in the summer. People have been going, when are you going to do it? When are you going to do it? And it's through meetup.com. And it's just been too hot. But today's going to be a beautiful day. So I'll be taking people and leading them through, you know, nice paths by a river, and the other side's a highway, but we'll forget about that. Okay, take care. Thank you for being here. Okay, bye now.
Thank you.
Oh, Iman, okay, you're still there. Oh,
Yeah.
okay. My thing fell down and everything. I've got to